the previous sessions, we have tried understanding what is an Azure repos, what is GitHub, how are we creating a pull request in GitHub, how are we trying to create a pull request in Azure repos. So I've given a walkthrough on these things. Then we have dealt understanding what is the impact of source code and what are the risks and threats which can be encountered for a source code. Now, after that, one more thing we can start looking at it is understanding the security control pattern. So when we wanted to implement security controls, you need to understand some security control language. Okay, a high level language. I'm not going and talking about what is a security control we go and implement for uh, Azure repos or what we implement for a GitHub and all that. I am talking in high level category, a control which is implemented specifically for access, it comes under control access management. If you're talking about uh, monitoring creating any alerts for such specific activities, then we come under the monitoring and logging control implementation. There are categories under which the controls can come in. And here, one of the category which you need to know is access control user management. So after this, my recommendation is you need to drop what are the categories of security controls. So we'll start saying access control user management is one thing, and then authentication is one thing. And then we have secure communication is the secure communication is one more parameter category. And then branch merge controls is one more category. Security scanning vulnerability alert, vulnerability management can be one category, and monitoring and alerts can be one category. Hope you got me. That's how it is would have been written, but you can bring down those. So that is category specifically scoped this Azure repos and GitHub. We are not trying to focus with the other how do I keep it with the other security categories. There are a lot of other security categories. We are not jumping into it. And if you see what is the difference between an access control and authentication, let's understand and jump into the topics. Okay. And once we start getting to know about all these things, probably from there you can start understanding when I'm implementing a control, it will be definitely new to you, but you would be understanding why it is coming, why how someone, a security engineer, is trying to look at it and trying to develop that. That's where you have to understand that. Now let's talk about access control here. Now, what is related to access? What is related to other authentication? So you need to understand two terminologies called authentication with authorization. Look at the images. Okay. So authentication means you're giving a credentials. So I'm sharing the uh, files or the what do you say, this source code, or I'm sharing this videos and everything, you guys. But you have to when I'm sharing it in Drive, how are you going and accessing it? You are going and checking, you're giving your credentials and logging into the Google Drive. That is authentication. So Google is authenticating whether you are the right person or not using your credentials. If I can take your credentials, then even also Google Drive will authenticate me, assuming that I am the person you are. Okay, so that's the reason why authentication, your credentials are very important. And in terms of authentication, how are we securing it? Because if someone gets to know other persons, other employees source, their credentials, username and their password, there is a very good chance of we can get the source code. If you think in the source code point of view, security point of view, let's understand this fact. Okay, that if someone is accessing, so yourself, you are as an employee of an organization, you're accessing a source code using your username and password. If I could able to get that username and password, how would uh, I get access to that source code? Yes. So how do I ensure here that other than that, how can I secure it more better? And that's where the one of the category they're trying to talk in terms of authentication factor is two-factor authentication. It means that other than just giving there is a 2FA as an additional layer of security for user accounts. So users are required to provide a second form of authentication such as unique code from authentication app or a physical security key other than their password. So after they're giving their username and password, it will ask for a code. And this way, so that user he has to open his phone and access his authenticator app and they provide the code, or he can have a physical token given where from that we can generate a code. So who will provide this all? So organization will provide these things. But GitHub or you can have from Azure Repo, Azure DevOps also such methodology of doing it. Now this way, even someone gets to your credentials, they can't have the access to your authenticator app to your physical device. So this way we are securing the authentication. Does that make sense? So I'm not here trying to talk about uh, control alone, but the category. So if you look at it, how are we trying to secure in terms of an authentication? This is how a control looks like. Any questions here? Do you want me to repeat it once again? If you're unclear about any specific thing, you can ask me what is that you wanted to understand. So that's an authentication. What is an authorization? Authorization is saying that once I give that access to that Google Drive videos or text files or whatever it is, do you have edit access? Do you have read access? Okay, uh, that defines read access or what do you say, write access, or you can go and share that file to some other people. That will define as authorization. And authentication is you giving your username and password credentials and you're logging in. So how are we trying to secure in terms of authorization, access control? There we go. We have some following controls on that. Now, if you are talking about how are we trying to talk about how are we securing authentication, we have few things, topics to be discussed on it. So, so let me start from the starting itself, which is access control user management. And when we talk about user access control user management controls, okay, if at all there is a repository. So when talking about an authorization point of view, how are we giving in access? So what access do they have? Do they have a read access? Do they have a write access? To what specific branches they can have? That all can be dealt in repository access. So GitHub allows repository owners to control their access to the repositories by specifying user or team permissions. Owners can grant individuals or so what is that saying? Someone who is owners or having the owner role, they can go and grant other people or a group of users read and write access or read access only or write access only, something like that. Okay. And what is collaboratory management? So under the repositories or the source code, we have also another control called collaborator management. And this is talking about repository owners can invite collaborators to work on the repository. Okay. So not everyone will be having the access to the repositories. You can go and invite specific users to go and contribute whom to be contributing that repository. So just because you have the username password doesn't mean that you will be having access to the repositories, and that might be private. So you need to go and invite that user, whomever you wanted them to have that repository access. If you wanted repository access, someone has to go and give that one. So in your organization, when you join into an organization and you don't have a repository access, now what will you say? You need to say to the owner, so may know who is the owner of that repository. Can you give me I need for this so and so email ID to be given access so that I can go and ahead and access the repository. Now, if you are unsure on this one, no, you will wait for someone to come back and tell you when you join an organization. So you have to wait for someone to come and tell you that. Now, instead of that, you need to understand. So when your control is coming in, definitely a control will be implemented into any organizations because of the security norms and all that. You need to understand and reach out, because in GitHub they might not be talking about all this specifically. You need to go ahead and a control security control standpoint, you have to go relate that and relate it to your organization wherever it is needed. So collaborators can be granted read or write access as they can contribute to the repository by pushing changes and all that. Okay, so the next is web fire application firewall. GitHub provides a built-in web application firewall to protect your repositories, user accounts, and all that. So this is I haven't directly seen something which has been attached to the GitHub, but let me go and validate. So if you should not trust everything, so I'll just go and say built-in web WAF with GitHub or GitHub with WAF, whatever it is. Implement firewall for GitHub. And geolocation. Okay. Okay, I need to research on this factor. So when something are there like this, so need to go and validate whether they are existing or not. So when I was asking you to go and give me the comments and all that, please understand that need to go and research. You should not trust everything which you can see there, because doesn't mean that if it is coming from ChatGPT, you need to believe this. Okay, so here I'll say that should validate content. Now we have audit and logs reporting. Unsure whether this one. Okay. So here, in terms of anyone who's having access and all that, might be a tracking that specific thing. Okay. So allow administrators to monitor user actions. So whoever is having the access to this repository, we wanted to go and check their what are they doing with the repository and that one. So this way we can have a better uh, grip on the or better what do you say, how do I keep it, you have a better control over the who which user is having what access and what are they doing actually. Okay, so in that point of view, I believe the audit and recording report related to only just related to the access of users. We try to limit our scope of audit and reporting for related to access control till that level. Now the next comes is SSO. What is a single S sign-on? In an organization, you wouldn't be just having access to one tool like GitHub and Bitbucket or alone. You might be having access to multiple applications, not just in terms of repository, but might also be in point of other applications, whichever you're using in your organization. So you will definitely log in with your credentials and you will be accessing lot of applications, whichever you needed in your web browser. Now that point of time, SSO will do a great job, because every time you log into a different application, you need to provide the same user name and credentials. Is very tiresome practice. Instead, what you will do, you will go with an SSO, single sign-on. So once you log in into one application, so if you are trying to access another web application and all that, you already as you're already in the same machine and you are being authenticated for one application, for the same machine, when you're opening another application, it will not ask your uh, credentials anymore. That's what is actually doing. So what they're trying to say is GitHub supports SSO. Yes, I've seen in multiple organizations where GitHub is utilizing SS4. So where you're trying to log into other web applications from, suppose you're logging in Azure portal, you're opening Azure DevOps, it done as an SS4. You're opening Google Drive. So if you're seeing here, for Google itself, you're having multiple apps and all that. When you're going to Drive or you're going to YouTube or you're going to Google or Gmail, everything, you just once you signed in, you can go and access the rest of the applications. So what is happening? It is kind of this is an SS4. So you're accessing this application with your credentials. Okay. Once you're signed in, you can go and access the other ones. What if you're not signed in? If you're opening Gmail, it will ask your username and password. If you're opening, so once you have been signed in one application, you don't need to go and sign in for the other applications. So that way the SS4 implementation is helpful for a source code so that they don't need to keep giving their username and password everywhere. I hope that makes sense. Okay, if you guys are not clear with this, you can ask me to repeat it, or I can go ahead and that once again. Okay. I'll be waiting for, meanwhile, you can type your responses and everything, but I'm going with the next topic, which is protected branches. What is protected branches here? So we are giving whom should have what access and all that. We can also tell about users not to send their push request directly to some branches. We wanted to protect our branches for main branch or release branch or master branch or dev branch. We wanted to protect it from users sending their request. It might have tend to be a bad code. So they, once you ensure that some branches are having that rules, protection rules as such and all that, users won't directly will be able to push their code from their Git local machine, but they will be in a position to send the changes from their branch using a pull request methodology. And in pull request, whoever is creating that, it should be reviewed by some user, a lead or someone, and only once everything is approved, they can go and allow that pull request to be completed. Not everyone will be in a situation to allow that pull request. So this how we can go ahead and plan that. Okay. And what is happening because of this? Why it is coming in authorization point of view, access control. So we are limiting users to access to the other some specific branches where can't push their code. So that's where it is everything these are coming under the access part. Now, in terms of authentication, I already have explained about two-factor. But you guys have any questions on this one, you can ask me. So related to repository access permissions or related to collaborator management or related to audit logs or SSO or protected branches, you can tell me. I have to validate the WAF and I have to come back to you guys. Yes. Have you questions? Please let me know here. Chat section. I hope I'm not fast and I'm trying to be clear enough. Okay. So let me explain you here about what is so I explained you what is authentication and everything. Now I explained you that two-factor authentication. We also have OAuth applications. So what is OAuth? So you can directly using OAuth, there are you can connect uh, your GitHub to the other applications wherever it is needed so that they can avoid. So when you wanted your GitHub to be interacting with the other applications as such, okay, at that point of time while you're importing source code, you know to give some hard code, the user credentials for the application to go and access this source code and all that, which is in there in the GitHub. So we can directly go ahead and you because GitHub is supporting the OAuth, it helps in integrating with the third-party applications and everything. So administrators would be in a position to ensure that the third-party so applications, whichever wherever it is needed, with the right service principals or credentials, they can go ahead and integrate the third-party services. We will definitely get back to that one in detail about each one. How are we implementing it? Like how are we implementing protected branches? how are we implementing the logs, reporting, SSO, or collaborator management, or repository access. We have to get into each one while we are implementing it. Now, at this point of time, I just wanted to explain that. The control. Now, what is secure communication? Why do we need it? So, in terms of authentication, we have tried addressing the risk which can be faced. One risk which you are facing is, what if someone gets to know the credentials? What if during the point of time where GitHub is trying to integrate with third-party services, there's a good chance that you're using a username and password and hot coding it somewhere. Instead, okay, you use OAuth, because already GitHub supports that. You can use easily to integrate your third-party services, and administrators of that particular repository would be in a chance to authenticate to the third-party services for that GitHub repository. Similarly, protected branches and SSO were meant for the access, controlling the access of that particular repository. Now here we have secure communications. So I'll definitely take a step back here after this secure communications. I want you to research from further from there, whichever till now what I've covered after secure communications. And tomorrow we'll talk about merge branch controls and the vulnerabilities alerts and monitoring alerts and all that. I could see that this is all security controls related to GitHub. This entire thing so far here. Now, so you need to have the heading specifically saying security controls for GitHub. And then we will have what else? We have for Azure repos, we have similarly controls for Azure repos, and we have to see how that be implemented. So that's, I see that were the missing ones. But yes, let's go ahead and implementing security controls, it is fine, but we have to give a heading saying security controls for GitHub. Okay, so let's understand regarding secure communications. What is secure communications? So obviously, if at all you're reading a source code from one server where it is having the repository, and what if the communication in the internet, someone is able to, a hacker is able to do a man in the middle attack or a packet capture and all that. There are different risks can be associated when someone are interacting with internet. How are we able to secure communication? Because the data which is flowing to and fro between the network from one machine to another machine, when we are accessing the source code, obviously source code, if something is a intellectual theft and all that can encounter, we don't want to encounter a financial loss and all that. So keeping all this in mind, we have to secure the communication while we are accessing the source code and all that. So here, that is why it is recommended to use HTTPS URL instead of just having an HTTP. What is an HTTPS? So if you get to understand the difference between HTTPS and HTTP, HTTP when passes the information, it will not encrypt it, whereas HTTPS will encrypt using the SSL certificate. So every website, that's why you are visiting, data which is going to and flow between the server and yourself is encrypted using a secret, certificate, which is provided by the website itself. So this is making us more secure in terms of the communication, or means that the document which I'm accessing over the internet from the Google server is ensured because of the secret data. It is completely encrypted. So someone even does a man-in-the-middle attack between my server, between my machine, laptop, and Google server. Between the network, someone tries to even do as the man in the middle. They will not be in a position to even get even when they get the packets, they can't be able to decrypt it, because it will be in completely in encrypted phase because of the certificate. So that's the difference between an HTTPS and HTTP. You can go and research here after this session that how it is a difference between HTTPS and HTTP. So you have to ensure that users are using HTTPS URL while they are trying to connect to the source code. Next one here is SSL certificate. You can an SSL digital certificate. So that is what is used for HTTPS. Okay, so how it is related to GitHub, I would have to understand that fact there. On GitHub, HTTPS and SS certificates are used to protect the security, and you interact with GitHub website, repository, and other services that communicate secured with. Okay. We need to check whether we can go and give a certificate, our own certificate or not, because organizations what have, they'll have CA authority tools like that, which are certificate generators. So what is a certificate? You need to also know. So when you read about HTTPS, SSL certificates and all that, you will definitely get to know more information. But in a simple layman's term point of view, that will certificate have an algorithm, and using that one they will encrypt it, and it is very difficult to decrypt without the certificate. It's almost impossible, not difficult. So that's why I need a. So there are different certificates. Root certificate. So when you talk about certificate, we have certificates which are placed in a server. We have certificate which is placed in our machine, and based on that, the encryption and decryption do happens. And so when you're reading about what is an SSL and everything, you'll get to understand about it. You can reach me if you have any questions over that. I can go and explain you while have questions on that. So I have to go and check whether we are able to upload SSL certificates or not into GitHub. Should validate whether SSL certificates can be provided. Next, secure Git operations refers to the measures GitHub takes to ensure the integrity and confidentiality of the code data stored on the platform. Some of the key security features provided by GitHub for Git operations include HTTPS, SSL, TLS, certificates. Okay, one of the key features. Seems this is a repeating content. I feel you have to look at what is. So we have to validate whether this is a repeated content or not. This is a repeated content. Why am I trying to show this way? Because you can get any project from internet. If you are able to understand each word and try to figure out how to keep it in a organized format, everything looks like a production project. Trust me, there is no much difference between a production project and a normal POC which you do. Okay, the only difference lies in the enhancement of your perspective over that POC. If you're trying to write a hello world, that is will definitely will not be there in a project or in a production. But if you write something more better, which makes sense for that, and the same thing which you're learning, it definitely the same way we use it in the production. So we have to understand in terms of seeing it, always mapping it to how am I able to write a code, how am I able to write a document which can be utilized for by the hundreds of users or employees in my organization. And when I'm thinking about developers to go and implement so and so, how can I write it in a more easy readable format so anyone who's reading the documentation can go and implement it? And how can I give a initial understanding of what is this project all about? Because not everyone will have the patience to read the entire document. How do I present it? So you have to look at all these factors and you have to write it. And when you think in that fashion and you write a project, okay, trust me, that will become a production project. That's what is the difference, okay, between a POC and a real-time scenario. Real-time scenario and a POC is the enhancement. It is not just you alone who is writing the project. You have to think that when it's 1,000 crores business or a lakhs crore business, how many people employees are there and how many people would be consuming this for what purpose, and how do I make it more secure, how do I make it more easier, how do I make it more sensible, based on what type of stakeholders will come and look at the document, what should I go and do it. So you have to start habituating it. Now the faster you habituate, faster your it definitely looks, the better your maturity level over that the software engineering looks like. And the more, the better the maturity, the more startup companies or any other companies would prefer to make you part of it, irrespective of age. So I believe right now age is just a number and how it works in an organization. If you have to trust it and go with the flow. So so I'll stop here till here for today. You guys can continue from tomorrow. Meanwhile, we'll go with the further things from tomorrow. Meanwhile, you guys go and read it and edit the document. And whenever you have made it, mention in the comments that this is what I've changed, and let me know your comments and all that. So I wanted to see how much you're really going through. Definitely there will be, I'm going in a very high level. Definitely there will be a lot of changes, even in the sentence framing or in the active voice and passive voice. So we have to write it in a passive voice, and let's see how many people are actually going ahead and changing that. Stopping the recording.